He jumped into a raging river to save a drowning baby gorilla, but the real shock came after the rescue. Just as the baby recovered, its entire family vanished without a trace, leaving behind an impossible mystery. Was this the end of the story, or the beginning of an incredible search? Watch this story of courage and trust, and let us know in the comments. If you were in his shoes, what would you have done next? Dr. Alastair Finch adjusted the focus on his binoculars, his movements slow and deliberate, honed by 30 years of watching the world from the patient quiet of a jungle hide. Below him, in the sun-drenched sanctuary of a Congolese valley, the Mvula guerrilla troop moved with the gentle rhythm of a family at peace. The morning mist had long since burned away, leaving the air thick with the sweet, loamy scent of orchids and damp earth, a world painted in 1,000 shades of emerald green. Alastair's gaze, and his heart, was fixed on the troop's youngest member, Keo. He had nicknamed him, meaning mirror. The name felt right. In the baby gorilla's boisterous movements and wide, curious eyes, Alastair saw a reflection of the jungle's own untamed, innocent spirit. He watched as Keo tumbled through the undergrowth, a chaotic ball of dark fur, before scrambling back to the safety of his mother, Zola. Her name meant peace, and she was the calm center of the young one's world. She would scoop him up, her massive, gentle hands grooming his coat as he clung to her back, peeking over her shoulder at the strange, still shape of Alastair's observation post. Leading them all was Jabari, the silverback, whose name meant brave. He was an immense creature of silent, coiled power, but his leadership was calm, his presence a source of security for the entire troop. Alastair smiled. This was the perfection he had dedicated his life to protecting. Not just the animals themselves, but the delicate, invisible threads of family that bound them together in this sunlit kingdom. The midday sun was high and hot, casting short shadows on the ground as the troop foraged near the slow-moving river that bordered their territory. The air was sleepy, filled with the drone of insects. Alastair was making notes on their feeding patterns when a sound, sharp and violent, cracked through the tranquility. An old ironwood tree, dead for years, had finally surrendered. A massive branch, heavy as a battering ram, tore free and crashed through the canopy, landing in the dense foliage near the riverbank with a deafening explosion of splintering wood. Panic, instant and absolute, ripped through the Mvula troop. In the chaos, Zola leaped back from the perceived threat, her maternal instinct screaming for safety. The sudden jolt was too much for Keo. The baby gorilla's tiny hands lost their grip on his mother's back. He tumbled down the short, slick mud bank, a small, dark shape landing with a soft splash in the surprisingly swift current of the river. Zola let out a shriek of pure terror. Jabari rushed to the edge, his great brow furrowed, but the baby was already being pulled away. The silverback had to make a choice, the life of one or the safety of all. With a series of deep, guttural commands, he rallied his terrified family, herding them away from the danger and into the dense green maze of the jungle. From his post, Alastair felt his blood run cold. The world seemed to fall silent. All he could see was the troop melting into the trees and the small, bobbing head of the baby gorilla being swept downstream. Action shattered Alastair's paralysis. Medical kit at the riverbank now. He barked into his radio, but he knew there was no time to wait for his team. He crashed out of the hide, his long legs pumping, his boots sinking into the soft earth. The jungle became a green blur, branches whipping at his face, his breath coming in ragged bursts. His focus was absolute, narrowed to a single point, the struggling form in the water. The baby gorilla was no longer fighting with purpose. His movements were weak, his small body losing its battle against the river's relentless pull. He was getting tired. Alastair pushed himself harder, his lungs burning. He had to get ahead of the current. Finally, forcing his way through a thicket of hanging vines, he emerged onto a clear patch of bank downstream from the baby. Without hesitation, he waded into the cool water, the current tugging at his legs. He moved with a practiced sureness, intercepting the small body as it drifted past. He scooped Keo into his arms. The baby gorilla was limp, his fur slick and cold, his fight completely gone. Alistair held the small, fragile weight against his chest, turned, and powered his way back to the shore, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm of fear and fragile, desperate hope. Back at the sunlit research camp, the next hours were a delicate dance of survival. Alistair and his small team worked with hushed efficiency, warming the chilled baby gorilla with thermal blankets and carefully administering a glucose solution. Keo was weak, but he was alive. The following days melted into a routine of care that was as much about building trust as it was about healing. Alistair took over the feedings himself, holding a bottle of specially designed formula for the baby. He watched, fascinated, as Keo's tiny fingers would instinctively curl around his thumb, a primal need for contact. The sounds the baby gorilla made began to change. The frightened whimpers were slowly replaced by soft, curious grunts. The true breakthrough came during a hydrotherapy session to help Keo regain his strength in a controlled way. Alistair used a shallow, man-made pool, its water warmed by the afternoon sun. One bright, clear afternoon, something magical happened. Keo, who had been hesitant at first, finally surrendered to the safety he felt with Alistair. He leaned back into the water, his limbs going slack, and simply floated. His arms and legs were spread wide, his little pot belly sticking out of the water, and his face was turned to the sky in an expression of absolute serenity. The water lapped gently at his dark fur as he drifted, a perfect picture of peace. Alistair stood motionless in the pool, a lump forming in his throat. Overcome with a profound sense of awe, he slowly extended his hand, palm up, not to touch, but as a silent, reverent acknowledgement of the gift he was being given. It was a moment of pure, unconditional trust, an unspoken bridge built between their two separate worlds. With every passing day, the baby gorilla grew stronger. Keo's mischievous spirit returned, and he would tumble around the camp enclosure, a sign that he was fully recovered. The mission, Alistair knew, had to change. The goal was no longer rescue. It was reunion. He sent his best tracker, a quiet man named Didier, to locate the Mvula troop. But when Didier returned 3 days later, his face was etched with confusion. "They are gone," he said, shaking his head. "Their trail is clear. It leads directly to the gorge, to the edge of the Great Falls." He paused, looking at Alistair, and then nothing. The tracks stopped. It is as if they walked into the mist and vanished. Alistair felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't right. Guerrilla troops didn't just disappear. There were no signs of a fight, no indication that a rival troop had driven them out. It was a complete mystery. The problem had shifted from a simple reintroduction to an impossible riddle. He looked at the playful baby gorilla in the enclosure and was struck by a terrifying thought. What if Keo was now an orphan? Alistair refused to let the hope die. He spent the day poring over his old survey maps of the region, his mind racing. Jabari was an experienced leader. He wouldn't lead his family over a cliff. Then he saw it, a faint, dotted line on a decades-old map, a route long, thought impassable. An old guerrilla trail that passed behind the thundering curtain of the Great Falls. It was a treacherous ghost of a path, but it was the only explanation. He and Didier set out at dawn, with Keo safely secured in a specially designed carrier. The journey was perilous. The air grew thick with spray, and the roar of the falls was deafening. They followed faint, almost invisible tracks that led them to a narrow ledge hidden behind the massive wall of water. After a tense hour of navigating the slippery, misty passage, they emerged on the other side. They stepped out of the twilight of the falls and into another world, a hidden, sun-drenched valley, untouched and serene. And there, foraging peacefully by a stream, was the Mvula troop. The reunion was a masterpiece of careful planning. They positioned themselves upwind, and with a gentle nudge from Alistair, Keo let out a tentative, high-pitched call. Instantly, Every head in the troop shot up. Zola froze, her head cocked, and answered with a deep, resonant call of her own. She came crashing through the undergrowth, her eyes wide. The moment she saw her baby, she rushed forward, and the air filled with a chorus of soft, emotional grunts as mother and child were reunited, her hands lovingly checking every inch of the baby gorilla's body. Jabari approached, inspected Keo with a dignified sniff, and accepted him back with a soft, approving rumble before leading his whole, complete family deeper into their new home. Alistair watched them go, a single, silent unit disappearing into the emerald green. A profound sense of fulfillment settled over him, so deep it felt like a physical presence. In Keo, he had seen a reflection of innocence and hope, but he knew then that his purpose was never to keep that reflection for himself. His job was to return it to its source. He understood the great lesson of his life's work in that moment. True care, true love, is not about possessing something beautiful. It is the selfless, often painful, act of ensuring it remains exactly as it was meant to be, wild, whole, and free. The family bond is a force of nature, as powerful as any river. If this story of hope and reunion moved you, please help us share more stories like it with the world. Show your support by hitting the like button, and be sure to subscribe to our channel.